I've been swimming in the HVAC soup for about 7 years now as a residential service tech, and I had my fair share of experiences of the good and bad, and I'm just making this video to tell people that the HVAC trade is not always nice and fluffy. There's also a bad and ugly side to it as well. Now, I just want to point out that I'm not making this video to discourage anybody from the HVAC career. The HVAC career is awesome. I love it. Most of the techs I know love it, despite of any of the bad things that could happen. It's a great career path to take, and there's very, very few people that regret going down the HVAC road. But, that being said, there is some bad stuff that happens in the HVAC industry, some stuff that you have to deal with, and that's what I want to go over with today. Coming from my own experiences and from the experiences of other techs, I compiled a list of 10 things that are bad about the HVAC industry. So without further delay, let's begin, in no particular order, with number 1. And number 1 is that you do need to deal with customers, regardless of which field you're in. You know, the commercial installer service or the residential installer service. But of course, primarily this is for a residential service where, you know, every single house you go to, you have to deal with the next customer, the next, and you have to deal with about, 8 to 10 customers on average a day. So most of the time, people are happy to see you, they're happy with your work, but of course, there's always times when you get the unpleasant customer. For example, you can get a customer that, if it's like some engineer that's really picky about things, he can be over your shoulder the whole entire time while you're doing a repair, like replacing a blower motor, for example. And usually I'm fine with that. If somebody's watching me and they have questions, that's totally cool. But if they're asking questions not because they're curious, but because they're actually questioning every single move you do, then it gets a little bit irritating. When they're just, sorry for the vulgar term, but they're shoulder humping you. That gets kind of annoying. And then there's the angry customers. So some customers are just angry. Maybe not necessarily at you, but you're the final straw. You're the cherry on top. If you tell them some bad news, they just explode. For example, I was at a guy's house working on his furnace, and his carbon monoxide was like 5,000 parts per million. He had a crack in his heat exchanger. So I go back upstairs and I tell him, sir, it's a 30-year-old furnace. Your heat exchanger is cracked. The recommended fix is to just replace the whole furnace. That news totally ticked him off. That guy was so mad, he was furious. So after I broke the news to him, he's like, "What? Don't give me that crap. You know what? Get out. I don't want to see your face. You have 10 seconds to get out of my house. Get out!" And I'm just like, whoa, flabbergasted. Like, where did that come from? That guy just blew up. Told me to get the F out of his house, and, he's just almost like kicking me out. So, needless to say, I got out of my house, called the supervisor, said, "Hey, I definitely can't collect a trip fee on this guy because he's pretty ticked." So there's going to be customers like that are just furious, and, maybe they're just an angry person by nature. I was courteous, I was polite, I was by no means rude to the guy, but he just exploded on me because I told him that he needed a new furnace. And that's not even that bad. I had a coworker that had a guy pull a gun on him. Just put a gun to his head and said, "Get the F out." Same thing as me, except with a gun in your face. Of course, that's way more severe. So that guy left and called the cops and explained what happened. But hey, I know that there's probably going to be guys watching this that have a lot of experience, and there's probably going to be even guys that have, where their experience is older than me. If you guys could share your stories of the wildest customers you had to deal with, or the wildest places you had to go to, that would be super awesome if you share with us in the comments below. One of my favorite things to ask the older guys, when I just started in the field and I was riding along with them, that was like my favorite question to ask them. What's the worst customer you ever had? What's the worst house you ever went to? And what was like the biggest fail that you've made in your career where, it cost a lot of money and you completely screwed up some unit? That was all very interesting stuff. So if you could share your stories with us in the comments below, we would really appreciate it. And number 2 is there is a lot of alone time. Time when it's just you and the van, or if it's just you and your tools and the furnace or the air conditioner that you're working on, and that's it. And there's days when that's all you have. There's no interactions with other humans unless you get a phone call. It's just you and your equipment, and that's it. Now, personally, I like being alone. I don't mind it at all, but there are really social people who, that would drive them up the wall, and they would almost go crazy from having to do this every single day. Granted, you do talk to customers once in a while. In the commercial side, not as much. In the residential service side, you talk to pretty much every single customer. When they open the door, you say, "Hi, what was the problem?" And then they lead you to the furnace and leave you on your own. But there's a lot of times, the drive time, and when you're at the unit itself, it's just quiet, just you and the unit. Some people love that, some people hate that. to the point where you're sitting in front of the furnace for like an hour, 2 hours, you're troubleshooting, you're frustrated, you're lonely, and all of a sudden a cat comes downstairs, and it's just such a joy to see the cat. You're so excited to see somebody, you know. The cat says meow and rubs on you, leaves a bunch of hair on your leg, but you don't mind because you're so happy to see the cat. But anyway, if you're somebody that hates being alone, one recommendation I could give is to start listening to audiobooks. One of the best decisions I've made in my life is to stop listening to the radio. No more talk shows for me. No more music, no more news. Cut all of that out. Very rarely will I listen to the radio. Mostly, all I listen to is, through my phone. I listen to YouTube channels or audiobooks about, inspiration, motivation, education, financial literacy, stuff about money, all of those good things for life that are actually useful. I started listening to that, and man, was that a game changer. I call that healthy brainwashing. So if you don't do any of that, I would highly recommend it. And if you're interested, I would start out, if you don't know where to start. One name that I can throw out there, he's one of my favorite mentors, his name is Jim Rohn. He has some really good stuff. One of his quotes is, if you want things to change, you have to change. That guy is awesome. If you start with him, I bet you're going to get hooked, and you can go from there. Now, if you're experienced tech, and you've been actually doing this for a while, listening to good online mentors, if you could share some of those names in the comments below, that would be pretty awesome of you. I'm always looking for new online mentors that I could listen to. So yeah, number 2 was there's going to be many times when you're all alone. Just you, the furnace, and an occasional barking dog because you got a lock code from the house. You get in, and the kennel is conveniently placed in the mechanical room, and the dog is barking the whole entire time. I guess you're not very lonely, but it does give you a headache. But yeah, number 2, you will be alone a lot of the times. And number 3 is be prepared to work some insane hours when it's the hottest time of the year and when it's the coldest time of the year. I believe my record, as far as I can remember, for the longest amount of time worked straight was the coldest time of the year. Seems like every furnace in the town broke down. I started at 7 a.m. the one day, and I went through the whole entire day and night, and I ended at 5 a.m. the next day. So what is that, 22 hours? And when I boasted to my supervisor, I'm like, hey man, last week I worked 22 hours straight. And he says, that's nothing, man. I had a time when I was on call on Saturday and Sunday, and I worked 36 hours straight. He said I was going nuts. I'd be just falling asleep as I'm driving. Very unsafe. The company has hence changed the rules to, curb the amount of time some technician can be out. But back in that day, everything was game, so 36 hours straight. That's pretty crazy. And I'm sure some of you guys whose experience, exceeds my age, you probably have some crazy amounts of times that you worked as well. It would be interesting to hear what are some of the records in the comments below. What is the longest amount of time that you worked for straight? But yeah, that's just part of the HVAC industry. You gotta be prepared to work some crazy hours on the hottest times of the years and the coldest times of the year. Be prepared for mandatory overtime. Be prepared for just getting slaughtered when you're on call with just a crap ton of calls. All of that is bound to happen on the most miserable days of the year when it's the hottest and the coldest. Extreme cold, extreme heat. That's just the nature of the beast. In fact, when I was getting hired to my first job, even in the interview, as they were interviewing me, one of the conditions was, hey, we're going to ask you to clear up your summer schedule because we're always very busy in the summer, and you could expect to work 80 to 90 hours a week once in a while during the summer because we're going to be that busy. In other words, in the summer and in the winter, we own you. And number 4 is that the HVAC trade can be really hard on your body, physically. I mean, you're carrying a heavy tool bag around all day. If you're doing commercial, you might be carrying around ladders. If you're working on heavy equipment, sometimes the replacement parts are heavy. Oftentimes you find yourself in a really awkward position for quite a lengthy time replacing a part. There's been times that, after I replaced some part and it was really strainful, like it was an awkward position and it was a heavy motor or something, by the time I'm done, after that job, my hands are still shaking for like 5 or 10 minutes, because of all that strain that I was just under while I was doing that repair. But luckily, as I drive from house to house, by the time I get to the next house, that effect wears off and I'm ready for the next one. But sometimes the physical strain is real. I mean, it takes a toll on your body. There was this one guy, there was a comment I read on a different video. He said that for every year of HVAC, that's about 5 years on your body. So it takes a heavy toll. I don't think that statistic is quite right because there's guys with 40 years of experience. Either they have a really long lifespan, perhaps they had an easier job in the HVAC field, maybe low voltage control or something, or, that statistic is simply not true, but it does make a good statement. Most of the teachers that were my HVAC school teachers when I went to school, most of them were there, not because, there's a funny quote about teachers. They say that those that can't teach, so just because they can't do it, they go and teach. That's not the case with these people. I mean, they're highly educated. They have a bunch of master's licenses. And the reason they were teachers, most of those people, my teachers in the school, is because their elbows were bad or their knees were bad or something wrong with their back. They had surgeries and they could no longer just physically do the job. That's why they were a teacher. So it does take a heavy toll on you. So, right off the bat, those teachers would always tell us, knee pads, knee pads, knee pads, knee pads, knee pads, safety glasses, gloves, just wear it all. So number 4 was that the HVAC trade can be really physically demanding on your body. And number 5 is that you will never fully know it all. The HVAC trade is like a vast ocean of knowledge, and you just know a fraction of it. Every time I think that, hey, I'm getting pretty good at this, I have a whole month where, everything's going like clockwork, the units are getting fixed so easy. Once I see the unit, I know exactly what's going on. Everything is just, it's great. And then all of a sudden, the very next call, after I think that, I go to a next call and it's a brand new Lennox furnace and this thing is just a monster. And I'm just sitting there dumbfounded. I don't even know where to start. Humbling moments like that when you realize, like, crap, I know it. I think I know it all, but no, you really don't. There's so much stuff out there that you have to know. Or there's other times where, you have a couple of months where everything is going great. You don't have any callbacks. You just fix the stuff and customers happy. You don't have to go back ever. And then, you're starting to think to yourself, oh, I'm starting to get close to that expert level where I just fix stuff. I know what I'm doing. And then the next week, all of a sudden, you get 4 callbacks in 1 week or 5 callbacks because you screwed something up. It's always humbling, Right when you start thinking you know stuff, you really don't. There's so much stuff to know. So hopefully that doesn't bother you, but some people it does bother them, that they can never fully grasp everything. There's just way too much to know. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, if there's any of you guys watching that have 30 or 40 years of experience in the HVAC field and what I'm saying is not quite right, please do speak the truth to us in the comments below and I will stand corrected. And number 6 is the fact that unfortunately many of the HVAC companies out there are commission based. So they give you a base salary, which oftentimes might not be high, and you have to sell stuff or meet a quota to make the other part of your income. So, the pressure on most of those jobs is real. They usually start out slow. When you're a new tech, you're supposed to sell $3,000 in 1 month. As you become more experienced, they expect you to do more, 5, then 10,000. There's always this pressure that you have to sell. You gotta sell parts, you gotta upsell, you gotta sell new units. There's always that pressure. And my first job, I had that. And the second job, I didn't have any pressure to sell. There was commissions, but very small. And there was no pressure. Whereas in the first job, I had a specific quota. I had to meet a certain amount for every single month. And me personally and a lot of other techs, it just kind of sucks to have to always sell stuff. Even if the people don't need it, you have to offer it to them because it's just part of the job. That's what you're trained to do. So basically, be prepared to potentially become a salesperson. Personally, I don't think that's a good thing. The pressure to sell, meet a quota, you have to get the commission, The more you sell, the bigger your commission will be. Of course, the money is there, but a lot of times that starts to bring along with it some corruption. You're selling stuff that you're not supposed to sell. I like to think of myself, and you've probably heard this a lot of times before, but if you're not going to sell this to your own grandma or your own mother, then you shouldn't be selling that to a customer. But I may be wrong. Maybe that pressure to sell is a good thing. It gives technicians a drive. It gives them a nudge so they keep working harder and they try to sell more equipment. What do you think about that? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Is it neutral? Does it really not matter? I would like to hear your opinions about that as well. And number 7 is you are in danger. So, constantly in the HVAC field, regardless of which industry you're in, you're always going to be in a slight risk. No matter what you're doing, there's going to be risk involved. And I'm not just talking about bashing your knuckles on a wrench or getting a cut. Sometimes the cuts are pretty big, by the way. I'm talking about the risk of potentially getting electrocuted, even if you're being safe. If somebody else did something wrong, wired something wrong, it can get you. Or there's the risk of getting frostbite from refrigerant if the Schrader valve gets stuck and it's just spraying all over. Some valve bursts or some other abnormal situation happens that's out of your control. You can get hurt if you're commercial, you're climbing ladders, you're in high places or in your attic units or crawl spaces. There's a lot of possibilities of getting hurt. And this isn't HVAC related, but on my latest job, I work on more than just HVAC and dryers and washers and all that and stuff as well. One of my coworkers, he was working on a dryer that was tripping a breaker, and he got lucky that he touched the dryer vent with his nut driver instead of his hand. If he grabbed it with his hand, who knows what would have happened. But as he touched the dryer vent, it was a metal dryer vent, it arced to his nut driver, 240 volts. And actually, he came to find out that the whole entire vent was energized somehow. Who knows how it happened? Some wire was probably loose or shorting out somewhere, and the whole vent was energized. And this applies to HVAC as well. I heard a story on the news. I didn't hear the story. I read a story on the news that an HVAC tech got killed because he put his hand on the return duct, and the whole thing was energized as well. The whole entire duct, the return, was energized. When he put his hand on it, he got killed. And because he was down there alone, as I mentioned in, I think it was point 2, being alone, he was down there alone. So a customer came down like 20 minutes later, 30 minutes to check on him, and the guy was just laying on the floor. So even if it's not your own fault, it's still dangerous. You're always going to be surrounded by danger when you're in the HVAC trade, or I guess any trade for that matter. So unfortunately, that's just part of the job as well. One thing you can do to kind of help keep yourself safe is just wear your PPE. Get into a habit of wearing gloves. Get some comfortable gloves, maybe some that your hands can actually breathe in. That's always good. Wear some safety glasses. Of course, always use a kneeling pad. So aside from potentially getting bad knees and elbows and back and all of that, you got all these other dangers as well from refrigerant, from electricity cuts and etc., etc. I personally have been unfortunate enough to get slight frostbites, and I have been shocked before as well. It's a very throbbing sensation, and everything in your eyes just goes black. And, by the time you get off that circuit, everything's kind of vibrating. And my goodness, it's not pleasant at all. You almost meet your maker when that happens. And, if you're still alive to tell the story, luckily you survived it. And, if you have any dangerous stories that you were in yourself, where you were almost darn near close to meeting your maker, that would be awesome if you could share your story in the comments below as well. Okay, and moving on to number 8. This one is, like a cherry on top. Aside from all the danger that you're in, potentially, there's also the very filthy, nasty, disgusting places that you somehow end up going to, it seems like pretty often. So, for example, if it's not even filthy, if you're in an attic unit, the attic is full of fiberglass, and this fiberglass is just all over the place. You're breathing it. your lungs are starting to itch, your throat, you're coughing. You can be in a crawl space. There's spider webs everywhere. One of the worst calls I've been on it was a crawl space, which was, the unit was separate from the house. It was a split unit, but the furnace was in a cellar on the side of the house, and the cellar floods, the customer told me. The cellar floods, so the mud floor, there was probably 3 inches of water, standing water on the floor, which, by the way, is dangerous electrically. That can kill you as well. So I was kind of cautious going into that as well. But anyways, as I waded through the water, I got to the furnace, and lo and behold, I have to replace the blower motor. So in 3 inches of standing water, I had to replace the blower motor on that furnace. So needless to say, it was muddy, it was nasty, not a very pleasant experience. So oftentimes, you'll find yourself in an awkward position and in a very nasty, filthy, disgusting environment. Maybe you're cleaning up soot in a furnace, black stuff is everywhere. Sometimes there's asbestos, there's just a bunch of nastiness that you can run into. And there's always going to be the house with the 20 cats. They need a furnace as well. The job I work for now, I'm not obligated to go into houses that are not safe. I can call the supervisor and rearrange that. But a lot of times you do end up going in there. 20 cats. It seems like the kitty litter pretty much never gets cleaned. As you're walking in, all you hear, is crunch, crunch, crunch as you're walking towards the furnace. And guess what the best place for a kitty litter box is? In fact, 10 of them. The mechanical room, right? The closer to the furnace, the better. So it smells like bleach, smells like cats, there's cat hair everywhere, kitty litter sand is crunching everywhere. In those houses, I definitely wear my shoe covers to protect the floors, right? And to take it a step further, there's sometimes mice infestations, sometimes there's lice, there's bed bugs. You can run into some really nasty stuff. There's been times where when I came home, I completely stripped down before walking into the house. I walked in from the back because I knew that I was in some really disgusting places. And first thing I do is take a shower, really hot water, hopefully not bring any of that junk back home with me. Now, I know there's going to be plenty of technicians watching this that have been in some really disgusting places, and that's one of my favorite questions as well. What is the worst house, hoarder house, whatever house, what is the worst, nastiest place you've been to in your career? That would be very interesting to hear about in the comments below. Okay, enough with the heavy topics. Let's move on to something lighter, like a light lunch, for example. Or perhaps it's more like a steady snack throughout the day. Or sometimes it's just a straight up fasting throughout the whole day. So number 9 is half an hour lunch. What's that? In most HVAC jobs, guys, you can forget the term half an hour lunch. Some jobs have it, some jobs even have an hour lunch. But in most HVAC jobs, you're just eating a sandwich as you're going from one job site to the next job site, or when you're getting gas. Or sometimes you're so busy that you forget to eat altogether. I've talked to older techs that claim that they went for years without actually sitting down specifically just to eat a lunch. They always just ate stuff on the go. So I guess that's another aspect. Even health-wise, the nutrition part of it, eating and stuff, that most technicians are not very healthy eaters either because they're always just snacking on the go. And a question to our old and wise expert technicians that have a ton of experience under their belt. Interesting to know, by the end of your career, if you're retired already, what did you do food-wise? Did you, the whole entire time, did you just eat kind of junk food and sandwiches the whole entire time? Or towards the end, did you develop some kind of system so you can actually eat a little bit more healthy on the job? Nuts, veggies, fruits, and etc. I'll be kind of interested to hear about that, or are all the HVAC techs just simply eating junk food or sandwiches and pizzas all the time? And let's just go ahead and jump right into number 10. And number 10 is unsteady hours. So unfortunately, in the HVAC trade, the hours are very unsteady. We talked about the 90-hour work weeks, but there's also the flip side of that coin. There's also work weeks where you only get 10 or 15 hours a week. Many companies are like that. They keep you really busy in the summer and the winter, but during the downtimes, there's really nothing to do, so you just end up sitting at home. So unfortunately, there's quite a few companies out there like that. If you got lucky, you found a company that keeps you busy year-round doing other stuff. Or if you're self-employed, you have a different problem. You're trying to find, work to do for the people under you if you have employees. So unfortunately, that's just another bad aspect of the HVAC trade. The hours are not steady. They're always different from week to week. There's not a lot of security, the hours are not secured. Sometimes you're working a lot. Sometimes you're working very, very little, and you're just at home, sitting with your family, which can be a good thing too. And to end this video, I just want to read a interesting comment from Fred, who has 30 years experience in the trade. And he says, if you're going to be in the HVAC trade, be prepared to miss the following: holidays, birthdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, any and all plans, calls at all hours, fellow workers showing up at your house for parts, you going to their house for parts, extreme heat, extreme cold, working in the rain, working in the snow, working from an extension ladder, having your neighbors think that a case of beer buys your precious time, hurting yourself, and keeping dates with your wife or family and kids. All of those things are bound to get a little bit screwed up. It's a little bit hard on the family working in the HVAC trade for most guys. Well guys, and there you have it. Now you know the ugly side of the HVAC industry. Or maybe you knew it all along, and this whole entire time as you're watching this video, you're saying amen to every single one of those points. If you're one of those people, make sure you say amen in the comment section below. Or, the next time, somebody tells you, hey, your HVAC job is nice and easy, now you will have an excellent video resource you can send them to prove them wrong. If you have any other additional things you want to add to everything that I already said, or maybe you disagree with something I said, I welcome you as well in the comment section below. And even after saying all of that, I can proudly say that I love HVAC, I love my work, I don't regret going to school for that, and almost all of the techs I know that went to school for this career and they're doing this career, they're loving it, despite all of those bad, ugly things that we sometimes have to deal with. So if you're picking and choosing, you can't decide which career you want to take, don't be discouraged. Even though I said a bunch of bad stuff that can happen in this career, it's actually a very rewarding, very good career to have. So if you're undecisive, you can safely make a decision, you're not going to regret it. In fact, you know how in the beginning of the video I said there's always two sides to a coin? We went over the bad side, and I'm going to make another video of 10 reasons or 10 things that are good about the HVAC career to kind of curb the effects of this video. So make sure you watch that video as well if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, found it useful. Don't forget to mash that like button on the way out, and we'll see you next time. And if you're still here and not in the comment section below, you're really missing out. But hey, let me tell you something. The other day, my dad was working on a car, you know, he's down there, he's doing something with the motor, who knows what he was doing there. And I come up to him and I ask him, hey Dad, can you explain to me what a solar eclipse is? And without looking at me, he says, no son. And I'm like, really Dad, you don't know what a solar eclipse is? So he pauses what he's doing, he looks up at me, and he repeats himself, no son.